Dennis Rader, BTK, the coldness behind the mask. I am Spectre. Let's uncover the truth. Dennis Lynn Rader is one of the most bizarre and dangerous figures in world criminal history. He was born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas. His childhood appeared normal. He grew up in a middle-class family, finished high school, and served in the military. But beneath this normal appearance, dark fantasies and violent tendencies were hidden from a very young age. According to Rader's own statements, he began having violent fantasies about women as a teenager, thinking about binding them, torturing them, and killing them. These fantasies planted the seeds for his future crimes. Rader married Paula Dietz in the early 1970s. He became the father of 2 children, his son Brian and his daughter Carrie. He worked as an environmental compliance officer for the Park City municipality in Wichita. This job gave him access to people's homes and lives, essentially an ideal mask for a predator. At the same time, he was a trusted member of the Lutheran Church, even serving as president of the church council. His neighbors knew him as a quiet, polite, ordinary family man. But behind this mask, from 1974 to 1991, one of Kansas's terrifying nightmares was hiding. BTK, the meaning and symbolism of the name. Rader chose the nickname BTK for himself: bind, torture, kill. These 3 simple yet horrifying words perfectly describe his criminal methodology. But this name was not chosen randomly. For Rader, it was a brand, a signature, a source of pride. He viewed his crimes not merely as acts of violence, but as works of art, as projects. The BTK signature gave him a sense of ownership over this art. He saw himself not as a simple criminal, but as a factor, as fear itself. The crime period, 1974 to 1991. Rader's first crime was committed on January 15, 1974. He killed the 38-year-old Otis Otero family, the mother, father, and 2 youngest children. This crime was his beginning, and over the next 17 years, he killed 8 more victims. His victims were mainly women, although in some cases men and children were also targeted. Rader carefully selected his victims. They were usually people who lived alone and whose homes he could easily enter. Rader's criminal methodology was particularly horrifying. He would first bind his victims, an indicator of his need for control. Then he would torture them, inflicting psychological and physical suffering. Finally, he would kill them, by strangulation, stabbing, or shooting. But as terrible as the physical aspect of the crime was, perhaps even more so was the psychological aspect. Rader would talk to his victims, frighten them, use them as part of the game. In April 1974, Rader killed 21-year-old Catherine Bright. In 1977, Shirley Vian, Nancy Fox, and in March 1979, Maureen Hedge became his victims. Each crime was carefully planned, with risks calculated. Before going to the crime scene, Rader would conduct surveillance for weeks, sometimes months, learning the victim's daily routine, the house layout, entry and exit routes, and analyzing the neighbor's situation. In 1985, Rader killed 53-year-old Maureen Hedge. In 1986, Vicki Wegerle, and in 1991, Dolores Davis became his final victims. Interestingly, Rader did not commit any crimes after 1991. This is an indicator of his professional approach. When the risk increased, he stopped. The Wichita police were closing in on BTK, technology was advancing, and DNA analysis had entered criminal investigations. Rader sensed this and withdrew. The psychological game, letters and control. The most terrifying aspect of BTK's crimes was not only the physical violence but also the psychological game Rader played with law enforcement and the public. Starting in 1974, he began sending letters to the police and media outlets. In these letters, he sent details of the crimes, the condition of the victims, and even photos of items he had taken from the crime scenes. In 1978, Rader sent a letter to the Wichita Eagle newspaper and Cake Television. In this letter, he used the BTK signature for the first time and provided a list of his crimes. He introduced himself as the BTK Strangler. The purpose of these letters was neither remorse nor regret, quite the opposite, they were part of his game. He wanted to take control of the investigation, steer them in the direction he wanted, and keep control in his hands. Rader occasionally used ciphers, puzzles, and symbols in his letters. He enjoyed that the police couldn't catch him, this was proof of his intellectual superiority. In a 1988 letter, he wrote, "How many do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national attention?" This indicates his need for attention, but even more so, his need for control. The Silent Period, 1991 to 2004. From 1991 to 2004, BTK was completely silent. This 13-year hiatus is a rare occurrence in criminal history. Many serial killers cannot stop, violence is like an addiction for them. But Rader was different. He could keep himself under control. During this hiatus, he continued his normal life, he was promoted at work, became a grandfather, and continued his activities at church. But for Rader, this hiatus was not an end, it was merely a pause. He had not left his story unfinished. In 2004, after almost 13 years, he reappeared. Why? Because he wanted to continue his game, to complete his story. This is a central part of his psychopathology, unfinished business bothered him. The end approaches, 2004 to 2005 an arrest. In March 2004, the Wichita police received a letter from BTK. This was the first contact since 1986. The letter contained photos taken at Vicky Wegerle's crime scene and details of the crime. Rader had restarted the game. In May 2004, he sent a package containing victims' belongings, items taken from crime scenes, and a letter signed, BTK. In December 2004, Rader sent a disc to the police. On this disc was a document titled, BTK Story. In the metadata of the disc, that is, in the file properties, the name, Dennis, and Christ Lutheran Church, were recorded. This was the first serious technical mistake Rader made. The police followed this clue, checked the church's membership list, and found Dennis Rader. On February 25, 2005, Rader was arrested. At first, he did not admit his guilt, but later, perhaps because he was finally in the spotlight, he began giving detailed confessions. Investigators conducted hours of interviews with him, and Rader described every detail of his crimes, sometimes very coldly, sometimes with pride. Psychological profile, behind the mask. Dennis Rader's psychological profile is a classic subject of study in criminal psychology. He is a typical example of antisocial personality disorder and sadism. But the main characteristic that distinguishes him from other serial killers is his high level of functioning and ability to control himself. Rader was a psychopath, meaning a lack of empathy, absence of conscience, and disregard for social norms. But he was a successful psychopath, meaning he could mask his violent tendencies in a way that was acceptable to society and live a normal life. This made him dangerous, because no one could see his true face. The main motive in his crimes was control, binding his victims, completely overpowering them, having authority over life and death, all of these were expressions of his need for control. He viewed his victims as objects, their feelings, families, and lives were not important to him. The only thing that mattered was the process, that is, the execution of the plan. Rader's patience and planning ability made him particularly dangerous. He could wait for years, for the right victim, the right conditions, the right time. This is a completely different approach from impulsive criminals. He viewed each crime as an operation, calculating every detail in advance, time, place, entry and exit routes, risks. The letters and media contact were also part of his need for control. He wanted to steer the investigation in the direction he wanted, to draw them into his game. This gave him a sense of power. He enjoyed that the police couldn't catch him, that they were trying to solve his puzzles. Interview, the mask removed. Investigator, Dennis, the BTK letters are yours. Rader, yes. I wrote them. Every one. They were part of my game. Investigator, why did you write again after years of silence? Rader, the story was unfinished. I had to complete it. I waited 13 years, but those feelings, that sense of control, returned. I wanted to resurrect BTK. Investigator, why did you choose the name BTK? Rader, it was simple. It explained what I did and that was enough. Bind, to take control. Torture, to show my power. Kill, the final result, the decision-making. These 3 letters said everything. Investigator, family, work, community. People knew you as an ordinary person. Rader, true. I was normal at home, normal in society. My mask worked well. I even deceived myself sometimes, as if I were 2 different people. Investigator, but what about the criminal side? Rader, it was separate. Completely separate. Home was home, crime was crime. They didn't mix. When I was at work or at home, I didn't think about BTK. But when BTK was active, nothing else mattered. Investigator, did you have any conscience problems? Rader, no. I knew what I was doing. Every time. Conscience, that's weakness. I'm not weak. Investigator, do you feel remorse? Rader, no. Remorse doesn't mean anything to me. I had to do what I did. They were my projects. Investigator, did you think about the victims? Rader, not emotionally. I thought about the process. They were simply objects. Part of my plan. If I had thought about their feelings, I couldn't have done my job. Investigator, what do you mean by process? Rader, the execution of the plan. Everything as written beforehand. Entry, binding, torture, killing, exit. Every detail was calculated. Investigator, did you plan every operation from the beginning? Rader, yes. Nothing happened without a plan. I would observe for weeks, months. I learned their homes, routines, weak points. Without a plan, the risk would be too high. Investigator, what did you plan? Rader, time, place, entry and exit routes, risks. Weather conditions, neighbor's situation, house layout, victim's condition. Everything. Investigator, what did you do when the risk increased? Rader, I stopped. I waited. Sometimes for years. I stopped after 1991 because the risk was too high. Technology, DNA, cameras. I can wait. Investigator, how long would you wait? Rader, as long as necessary. Patience is my strongest weapon. People rush, they make mistakes. I wait. Investigator, why did you write letters to the police? Rader, to maintain control. To draw them into my game. To watch their helplessness, they're trying to solve my puzzles. This gave me power. Investigator, did you know you were getting attention? Rader, that was a side effect. My goal was to continue the game. Attention was good, but the main thing was control. Investigator, your speech and gaze disturb people. Why are you so calm and cold? Rader, when emotions get involved, people can't understand. I don't want to be understood. Coldness is my shield. If I got caught up in feelings, my plan would be disrupted, I would make mistakes. Investigator, why don't you want to be understood? Rader, because my plan is a game. It's not important for people to understand. On the contrary, their confusion is my advantage. Investigator, what do you think makes you dangerous? Rader, my patience. People rush. I wait. I plan. I control. They get caught up in their emotions, I remain cold-blooded. Investigator, can people understand you? Rader, no. There's no need to understand. I'm different. That's my strength. Investigator, You wrote again after a long hiatus. Was completing the story important? Rader, yes. If everything remains unfinished, the game is considered over. I had to complete it. I sent the disk, but I made a mistake. Metadata. Technical error. That's why I'm here. Investigator, the victims' lives and feelings weren't important to you? Rader, no. Each victim was simply part of my plan. Their families, feelings, lives, this would have interfered with my process. Investigator, what was most important to you? Rader, the execution of the plan and control, acting with every detail calculated. There was no room for coincidence. Investigator, how did you measure risks? Rader, every detail was calculated in advance, time, place, entry and exit routes. If the risk was too high, I stopped. I waited. Sometimes for years. Investigator, it wasn't important for people to understand you, but how did you see them within your plan? Rader, as objects. When emotions get involved, decisions are wrong. I had to remain objective. They were tools of my project. Investigator, your behavior is disturbing to observers. The mask of normal life, planned crime, and emotionlessness. Rader, everything was part of the plan. People can't understand. I lived in two different worlds, and neither interfered with the other. Investigator, now everything is over. Rader, everything has an end. I knew this. But I completed my story. Investigator, does this bother you? Rader, no. I'm cold-blooded. I've always been. Conclusion, the anatomy of fear.